people of Reddit who knew celebrities before they were famous. How different do they act now? When I was really young, I'd go the reptile park, originally owned by Bob Iwin and passed on to his son Steve. Steve was always nice, would do all the lizard and croc shows, would hang out and chat afterwards. My dad would take me there occasionally, and Steve would seem to remember us, treated everyone like an old buddy. This was before he became famous obviously, and the small reptile park became the Australia Zoo. In my final year of high school I got in the zoo for work experience, and they let me stay on. Steve was rarely there, and when he was he'd avoid guests, because they would swarm him, and he'd get nothing done. But when I did run into him, he was always super nice and still acted like that old friend. Didn't say crikey nearly as much as you'd think. That's definitely something Aussies say, but he really played that up for the cameras as his catchphrase. Unfortunately he died later that year, so right up till the end he was just a lovely person. Edit. Getting a lot of similar questions and comments, so no, I'm not from Beerwah. I had to travel 45 minutes each day to get to the zoo. It was worth it. Aussies do say crikey. I think it's more of a Queensland thing and usually said by older generations. Steve's dad Bob is an awesome dude too, who I also had the pleasure of meeting outside the zoo. Fun story. First time I ran into Steve, while working there he was holding 2 coconut halves up to his chest like a bra, and sheepishly put them behind his back when I walked into the staff area as the others around him burst out laughing. It was some joke, I forget what it was, I just walked in at a very awkward moment. Jennifer Lawrence. I moved to Louisville middle of 7th grade year. She was my first friend, and the first person I had a sleepover with. We hit it off. She was very different from me, a cheerleader, came from a lot of wealth, but her family was really awesome and we were both kinda weird and outgoing, so we become good friends very fast. Her family owned a farm that had a children's summer camp, hi ho, and we went to it a couple of times. She had one of her birthday parties there. I remember her kissing our friend John under a trampoline. We talked about it for way too long. We hung out fairly often until she moved to New York City a year and a half after we met. We started taking acting classes together in 8th grade at a local theater here in town, Walden Theater. It's funny because on our first day, we had no idea we were both taking the class. I walked into the first one, and there she was. We were both so excited to have a friend. We were in the first level of the theater, but after a couple weeks, both moved to the intermediate class. We were the oldest people in the class, so that's why they moved us up so fast. We carpooled together to Walden Theater every Tuesday and Thursday for acting class. I would ride the bus home with her, her mom would take us to class, then my mom would pick us up and take her home. She was a natural at acting, I'll tell you that. I was still somewhat shy, but she could pretty much be given any character, and even though she was 14, you'd believe it. She always talked about how she had a photographic memory, and that's how she was able to remember lines so easily. And she did. It was insane. I have read where she said she's had no prior acting, but this isn't true. I'm not sure if she said this for a part of her look, or maybe she considered it informal, but we definitely took acting classes our entire 8th grade year. I will say, what you see with her is what you get. She was always very quirky, kinda weird, which was funny, because she was so presenting, but really wasn't like that. She was very loud, made her presence known. It's been bizarre seeing her in interviews, because she acts the exact same. I remember she moved to New York City to pursue modeling between 8th and 9th grade. It worked because soon after she was in a commercial for Burger King and a couple of MTV's My Sweet 16 commercials as well. She was doing online classes for our high school, Ballard High School, and came to visit one time in 9th grade and another in 10th grade. I squealed when I saw her. I genuinely missed her. I had no idea she was about to become one of the most famous actresses of our generation. I always hear she comes to town for holidays, but at this point I have no idea how to contact her. She had a private Facebook for a while, assuming it was really her. For a time, I had a few fake accounts for her request to be my Facebook friend, along with a lot of people we went to school with. The last time we spoke was for my 21st day. I'm 29 now, but I would love to catch up with her. I can't help but wonder if she remembers me. I still have her yearbook photo she signed hanging up in my room, our yearbooks and a couple photos from a disposable camera. I'm from Oxford in the UK and knew Emma Watson when I was in school. She was a massive bully, a strong Regina George vibe going on, and bullied my friend's sister in her year so badly that my friend's sister had to leave school. The school were refusing to do anything about the bullying issue because Emma was their marketing tool. At every open day all the teachers would proudly tell prospective parents in a reverent hushed tone, "Did you know that Emma Watson goes to our school? Emma just has a really bad rep in Oxford." At one point, she dated one of my friends from another school, and let's just say that the relationship did not last because of her extreme anger management issues and cruelty towards people whom she considered beneath her, like restaurant staff, etc. I was younger than Emma, so thankfully never needed to interact much with her. But here is an incident that will continue to haunt me for the rest of my life. I was hanging out with friends in central Oxford one weekend and we decided to go to the covered market. As we were making our way to the market through the little alleyways, we ran into Emma Watson with her gang of friends standing around some girl who was clearly younger than her and at least a foot shorter than her. Emma was screaming at her, I don't even remember about what, and hitting the girl on the shoulders and the chest with her bag. I'm ashamed to say that me and my friends did not do anything. We just kind of ran away, which was dumb in retrospect. To summarize, Emma Watson was badly miscast. She would have made a brilliant Draco Malfoy. Edit. All of this makes her whole feminism act even more hilarious. I was local production contact on Hugh Jackman's touring theatre production, where he sang his favorite numbers from various musicals. Usually when a show comes in with big name stars, the star usually has a bunch of assistants, and they do the job they are paid to do, and that's it. The actor come on stage when needed, then back to their dressing room, and if you need anything, or if they need anything, you talk to the assistant. Prior to the first performance, I'm on stage dealing with a few little issues, trying to stay on schedule when Mr. Jackman walks out on stage, and my first thought was that he was going to be angry that we have kept him waiting to do his sound check. Instead he walks directly over to me, introduces himself, asks me my name, and asks a couple of questions, and doesn't even mention the delays. So we spoke for a few minutes, and then he went around and introduced himself to more of the local crew. I was a little blown away by meeting him, as I'm a fan, and thought that was really cool of him. Fast forward a week and I'm backstage after the performance, and I bump into Mr. Jackman in the hall. I say hi, but don't want to bother him, but he stops me. He remembers my name after meeting hundreds of people that week, and asks a few questions that related to our first conversation. Here's the thing though. The guy just did a 2-hour performance, and instead of just politely returning my greeting, he stopped and talked for a few moments with no false sincerity. To this day I'm still blown away by how genuinely nice he was, and always wondered what he was like before he became famous. He would also spend a huge amount of time after the show signing autographs and answering questions at stage door. My mum went to school with Heath Ledger. Or a school close to his? Boarding schools, man. I don't know. I just know that she saw him in school relatively often. Apparently he was a dick in high school. I feel bad saying that about a dead man, but my mum says it's true. Apparently he was like those exaggerated jock bully guys in movies and TV shows. He walked into a room with his lackeys behind him and just commanded the space. At some school dance or something, he was in the middle of the room doing his thing, and literally everyone else was lined up against the walls because they didn't want to get in his way. He went to this prestigious boarding school. Everyone knew that his parents were rich, but he dressed all grunge and tried to act like a troubled kid living in poverty, which is ironic because I went to school with troubled kids living in poverty and they all pretended to be super rich and popular like he was. He was apparently really rude. He pushed people around and pretty much was only ever nice to people in order to manipulate them. I'm sure my mum has more to say about him. She ranted about him for a couple hours the other day. She says that he cold got better and nicer as he got older. TBH, I don't know what the general public opinion of him is, or really anything about him, so I don't know if he actually did get any nicer. All I know is what my mum has told me, but she knew him as that over-exaggerated bully character. I knew Craig Ferguson when I was a kid in Cumbernauld. He always came across as very self-confident in a way I found quite scary. He was a couple of years older than me, but him and some of his mates used to hang out at the riding school outside of town, where my family kept a pony. It was a scruffy, rat-infested kind of place run by an old bloke, and a lot of kids, early to mid-teens maybe, used to congregate there. Some had horses/ponies of their own and some just hung out. I don't know why his wee gang started coming, maybe they were friends of the old bloke's daughter. They were always to the fore with whatever backquote projects were afoot, knocking down old walls, whitewashing buildings, hosepipe fights, rugby in the paddock. I kind of thought of him as a bully at the time, but think really it was just that his personality was so overwhelming to me as an introverted younger girl. If I saw them in town I'd get teased. If I was on my own I would try to avoid the streets they hung out on. However, when the local paper sent a reporter and photographer to do a piece on the riding school, and I was getting left out of it all because I had broken ribs from a riding accident, he brought the photographer over to me and made sure I got included. So probably he was like a big puppy that didn't realize how scary it could seem to smaller creatures, but no actual harm in him. Edit, and that disclaimer at the start of his novel, Between the Bridge and the River, where he says a standard bit about any resemblance between characters and real people being entirely accidental. Anyone from Cumbernauld High at the time could name the teachers described in the first chapter. I know a couple of internet famous people, think live streamers, influencers, etc. One, I'm still very good friends with, but he refuses to acknowledge my existence whenever he's in his internet/professional persona. Like, I'll pop by his stream, say hi, and he'll just ignore it. I live near an area that he would have to travel to at least once a year for his work, which what made him internet famous, and I would never get invited to see him during one of his performances. So I've just taken to not engaging in his social media posts/live streams/etc. point and force him to update me on his life through chat. The funny thing was, when I first met him, he was already semi-famous in the specific community, but I had no clue who he was, so maybe he likes it that I just treat him as a person rather than as his internet persona. I don't know. Unfortunately, for 9 to 10 months of the year, he has to be his internet persona almost all the time. So I used to rarely get his normal self until that time period is over. I worked with another before he got internet famous. I thought we got along really well, even heavily fought for him to be offered a specific role that he wanted and wasn't under consideration for originally. Then the company faked up, laid him off, not targeting him specifically, was just told to downsize the office by X amount, and I think they just chose people at random it felt, then realized their mistake and had him on contract, which he understandably got upset over and left to join an upcoming content creation group. Now he's extremely well known in specific circles and has ignored every message and birthday wish I sent since he got laid off. I stopped sending anything about 3 years ago because I got the vibes he was too good for me now. It makes me sad because we bonded so much over shared interests before he got famous. Answering this question is a double-edged sword, because if I name the person, they'll be upset, and if I don't, Reddit will scream pics, or it didn't happen. So, take from this what you will. The celebrity I know used to be a great friend and a caring young girl. You can tell she was destined for celebrity because she always hogged the spotlight. Not because she took it, but people were just drawn to her. In her teens, she volunteered at pretty much every opportunity, especially cleaning up the parks. She loves nature. One day, as we were headed to our park to clean up, there was a movie crew filming. As we got closer to watch, a few people noticed us and asked us to join in with the crowd. Never did figure out what movie this was, and trying to find us in the crowd probably would have been impossible. It was this moment she caught the bug to become an actress and started earning and saving money to make her dream come true. I supported her the entire way. We had lost contact once she moved to New York to continue her acting studies. After she graduated, she came home for a bit and she told me she was on her way to Los Angeles because she had a small role in her first movie. She'd write often, telling me what movies she was appearing in, wasn't a star just yet, and if it seemed interesting, I'd go see it. Didn't have the heart to tell her I didn't see her in 2 of the movies. Cut out, I guess. She finally mailed her big role, co-starring against an acting legend. At the time, she was 23, and it was pretty impressive how fast she made it big. A few years later, and this is pretty much when we parted ways, she came home to visit, and whoever this girl was, wasn't my friend. I can't say she was a snob, because that's a cheap excuse. She was definitely different, nice, but not in a genuine way. She wanted the attention, unlike before, as she expected it, rather than earned it as she did. These little things started to irk me, because she seemed so insincere about talking with us, like it was a chore for her to do. When I approached her and asked her why she was acting this way, her response was, "I don't know what you mean." I said she had changed, and she pretty much dismissed me for it, though I can't blame her. This happens often, I'm told. It's a shame, because in the next 10 years, not only did her star start to fade, she also became bitter. I was completely shocked to discover she had started smoking, and I'm probably denying to myself if she wasn't doing drugs as well. She's no longer a star, doesn't work in acting, and has a comfortable life now as she's married with 2 kids. She seems happier now, but I've never had the heart to reach out to her, because I feel I would be intruding on something she's probably wanting to forget. As I grew older myself, I started hearing the stories coming out of Hollywood how it can turn the most humble person into an asshole. There are truths to those stories, I'm sure, and a person behind each one. It shouldn't cost human dignity to make the movies we enjoy, but that's just my opinion. I was friends with the actor Brad Renfro when I was in college living in LA. We actually met in community service. We had both been arrested for minor drug/alcohol offenses. We swept the streets of Hollywood Boulevard. It was absolutely disgusting. In the morning we had to sign our name on a paper to ensure we got credit for showing up. There was a little white dude in front of me, and he signed Brad Renfro in awful handwriting. I recognized the name from the movie Sleepers, and the client. We were also the same age. Since we were the same age, and not prostitutes like many of the we got matched up together. He was super down to earth, maybe too down to earth. Very trusting to a fault. His nickname was Fro. He loved the band Slipknot and hip hop in general. He had a strong Tennessee accent, and had a band called Frodded. He even drove all the way to Westwood from Hollywood to pick me up one morning for community service, blasting Slipknot at 6:30 a.m. Not my kinda music, but he was really into it, and it was fun to see. He invited me over to his house on Melrose after work. It was a little bungalow off Melrose. We were smoking some pot and having beers when his girlfriend came home. She got very angry that Brad was drinking and smoking pot with a guy he met at community service. She then came back into the room holding a bunch of balloon ties she had found. She screamed that Brad was doing heroin again. Brad looked at me and said, "Tell her how we were just playing with water balloons." We hadn't been. She said she was calling his publicist and I should go. Brad apologized to me and said he would straighten out his girl and get back to me. I went home. I never saw Brad Renfro again until I saw his picture on the cover of the LA Times getting arrested in Skid Row for buying heroin. He then died of a heroin overdose about 2 years later at the age of 25. R.I.P. Fro. This one is really sad. Tara Reid, the American Pie actress, not the Joe Biden accuser. I worked in a bar in LA and she didn't have very many friends and enjoyed live music, so she'd come in twice a week and became really good friends with the bar staff. She was so pretty and fresh-faced. We knew she was trying to become an actress, which I thought was going to be hard since she was so shy. She'd come in and have 1 or 2 drinks and just talk to us all night. We protected her from being hit on, and she became part of our little bar family. She'd come to our bowling night and softball games and BBQs. Complete and total sweetheart. We were so happy for her when she got a movie called The Big Lebowski, which was filmed at the bowling alley we went to. We had no idea it was about to become one of the biggest modern classics of all time. She started coming in less, saying she was getting a lot of offers. Then American Pie happened. She came in during the filming with some of the cast, ordering drinks for everyone, and not paying for them. Okay, we thought, she's showing off. We will cover the bill for our little sister. Her behavior became more and more drunken and idiotic. She drifted away. I would see her on Melrose or at a well-known fancy bar, and she was a train wreck that we all know her to be. She was always really nice when we'd see her, but you've all seen what it did to her. Now she's a plastic surgery mess, pushing 50 and doing Sharknado movies. She is a classic cautionary tale about stardom and small town girls. She's been through rehabs and crisis management people, but at the end of the day, she's a mess. Maybe someday we will see her, and she can just be our normal old friend Tara. Not quite the answer to the question, but my brother and I met Robin Williams when he was filming the movie Patch Adams. One of the people running the yak machine outside gave us a hint that Robin liked to avoid crowds and likely wouldn't be walking out of the front door, where everybody was waiting, and looked over at a side door. My brother and I went over, and fearing that if he saw people near the door he would choose another exit, we hid in some bushes. About 10 minutes later he came out, and I was just so excited I jumped out of the bush and ran towards him as he was getting on a bicycle. He got off, and with a huge smile, said it was nice to meet us, and asked how long we were hiding waiting on him. He thought it was hilarious, shook our hands, and signed the copy of Mrs. Doubtfire I had brought. Asked what our favorite subjects in school were, and what we liked to do for fun. Then the crowd in front of the building figured out he must have exited out the back, and about 30 people started heading our way all excited that they found him. He then said he had to go as he wanted to avoid the crowd and attention, but thanked my brother and I by name for meeting him and talking with him. He gave me a high five and then hopped on the bike and rode off, waving back to us. He was such a nice guy, and it was an awesome experience. I showed that VHS to every friend that ever came over, but eventually over a few years the signature practically faded away. I was so bummed, and I decided to write a letter to him. I figured nothing would come of it, but I wanted to anyways. I wrote that I'm sure he didn't remember me, but I was one of the 2 kids who jumped out of a bush to meet him filming Patch Adams, biggest fan blah blah, and how I was sad that the signature faded, but that it was okay, because I got to meet him. A couple months later I received a handwritten letter from him saying he remembered us. He also included a signed copy of Mrs. Doubtfire as well as a signed headshot. I was over the moon. I was very sad and upset years later when he passed away. My ex-wife's aunt and Holly Hunter were best friends since childhood, growing up together, and all the way through high school. They were both in drama classes in high school and even both left the small town they grew up in and went to drama/acting classes together in college. Holly Hunter was scouted and given some bit parts in movies at a young age. My ex-wife's aunt was not. Holly went from college to Hollywood and got bigger and better parts and became a well-known star. My ex-wife's aunt dropped her acting classes and went into a clerical college, got a degree, and moved back home and got a low-paying job working for the same business for 40 years. She's lived with her parents and taken care of them, never moved very far up in her career other than being a secretary for years, and never got married. Holly has to this day remained best friends with my ex-wife's aunt, and once to twice a year, she flies back into town and takes said aunt out on shopping trips/dinners etc. Holly has flown this aunt to Hollywood to her home for vacations, taken her on other international vacations, paid for this aunt's Christmas for over 40 years now, bought her new cars, and paid for family expenses, like medical bills, the aunt could not otherwise afford. This aunt's parents passed away a few years back, one after the other, and Holly paid for every expense. The aunt has always lived a low-key life, nothing ostentatious, worked her low-paying job at the same business, but apparently has never wanted for anything, because anything she's ever needed Holly Hunter has paid for. This has always been a huge secret in my ex-wife's family that no one in the family really talks about, but it's always been known that Holly has helped this woman out her entire life, even with her retirement. Holly could have become a huge star and forgotten about this woman years ago, but both have remained best friends since they were small children and are still best friends to this day. I grew up with Billie Eilish and Phineas. We were both homeschooled, attended a lot of the same classes, and our moms were, and still are, very good friends. I've known Billie since I was 2, and she was 4. I'd say I saw her at least 3 times a week with the various classes we did together from when I was between the ages of 2 and 10, and her brother Phineas was often there as well. Anyway, I was a very shy kid, didn't talk to people much, except family and good friends. Billy and Phineas always made fun of me for being quiet. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was bullying or anything close to that, but it did get annoying, and I remember mildly disliking them because of that. I always looked up to Billy in kind of a little sister way, though. I moved to a different state when I was 10, and she was 12, 1 year before she released her first hit Ocean Eyes. Hearing her on the radio for the first time was so cool, and she rose to fame pretty quickly after that. I met her for the first time since she became famous last year, in June 2019 at one of her concerts. She and her mom invited my mom and I to come, and we hung out backstage before the show. She has changed definitely for the better. She was so nice. We have a lot of the same interests now, and I honestly feel we could be good friends if she weren't so famous now. She's a very genuine person now. She gets a lot of hate that I really don't think she deserves in the slightest. I met future Hall of Fame quarterback Steve Young in 1995, 2 weeks before he led the 49ers to their 5th Super Bowl win. My parents and I went to a coffee shop after church one morning. I was 6 years old, and I was decked out head to toe in 49ers clothes. The cashier, after seeing my fanboy outfit, pointed to a nearby table where Steve was sitting with a San Jose Mercury news reporter. At the time, Steve Young had just taken Joe Montana's starting quarterback spot, and there was a good bit of tension between the two. The reporter was interviewing Steve about this tension for an article. Little 6-year-old me, knowing nothing about the feud between Steve Young and Joe Montana, asked Steve for an autograph. He asked the reporter for a sheet of paper from the reporter's notepad, and before Steve signed the autograph, I loudly proclaimed I have a picture of Joe Montana on my wall. Steve smirked and asked me, "Are you going to hang this up with it?" I replied I don't know, and shrugged my shoulders. He smiled and said, "Well, give me a call if you do." The conversation was recorded verbatim, word by word in the newspaper the next day, and I still have the autograph, which reads to Matthew, "My main man, Steve Young, 49ers." But wait, there's more. Fast forward 25 years to January 2020 at the NFC Championship game in Santa Clara. My buddy somehow managed to get literal front row seats in the end zone at Levi Stadium. I wore the same throwback Steve Young jersey I'd worn for 10 years to the game. During pregame, Steve Young and his wife walked by. I shouted to him and pointed to my jersey, just as a show of support. He stopped, looked at me, and offered to sign it. I have a large collection of autographs and none of them came from anyone that stopped what they were doing and offered to sign. It's framed on my wall now, next to the one I got 25 years ago. TLDR, met Steve Young twice, almost exactly 25 years apart, and he is the nicest, most generous celebrity I've met. A genuinely good guy. Rick Riordan was my middle school social studies teacher. This was back in the early 2000s, when he was still in the process of writing the Percy Jackson books. Actually, he just posted a pic of himself in our old classroom the other day on FB, and it looks exactly like I remember. Before he became super famous, he taught at my school and wrote an adult detective series about a guy named Trinavero, I think, and my mom had some of the books. When I opened it up and looked inside and saw all the swearing and adult themes, it blew my 11-year-old mind. I brought the book to him at school and told him that it had twisted my poor, young mind, jokingly, so he grabbed it and wrote inside, "Dear Weasel, please untwist your mind." Rick, I think my mom still has the book somewhere. He was the best teacher ever. He dressed up as a samurai when we learned about ancient Japan and waved a fake katana at the students, who were late lol. And for our final exam he made us draw a map of Africa from memory, with correct latitude/longitude and correct geographical features, rivers, mountains, etc. I got an 84 on mine. He also used the teachers and many of the students in my grade as inspiration for the characters in his Percy Jackson books. So I personally know pretty much all of the characters in that book in real life. Minus the main characters who weren't based on anyone in particular. Our grade was very small, only 70 to 80 people at the time, so everyone knew everything about everyone lol. Actually, one of the characters is my ex-boyfriend. I was always super bitter that he was in the book and I wasn't lol. One of the most amazing experiences of my life. I haven't seen him in maybe 10 plus years, but I remember him vividly. From what I can tell, he is still a wonderful man to this day. All of us former students have nothing but good memories and kind things to say about him. Went to HS with Amber Heard. At lunchtime, the boys would take over a few tables and the girls would take over a few tables. Amber wouldn't just sit with the girls, but she'd sit with the boys a fair amount. She was very pretty, but didn't wield that power to become popular. She was liked by both the girls and the boys, and didn't care if you were popular or not, she'd be friends with you regardless. She had an artistic mind, even back then, and saw things differently than most. She was very passionate about her interests and beliefs too, but would want to understand yours. She began exploring her sexuality around sophomore year and expressed that she was interested in girls, which as a HS boy intrigued most of us. Our principal did not like that, as it was a Catholic HS, and she was asked to leave. I distinctly recall one day at lunch she told us she was going to move to Hollywood and become a famous actress. We all scoffed at that remark, saying yeah right, good luck. She didn't come back to HS the next year, junior year. We lost touch, but one day at a Barnes & Noble, I saw her on the cover of a magazine, forgot which, maybe Maxim, back around 2004 or 2005. Quietly said wow, she made it, good for her. Saw her at a party maybe 2 years later. She was telling us how she moved to New York to model, and then to LA. Said things were going well, but it seemed like it was all going to her head. She had either brought her girlfriend, or found one at the party, and made out with her often. Enough to where the rest of us were like, okay this is weird, like she was trying to prove a point. I haven't seen nor talked to her since. But when she made the news for dating, and then marrying Johnny Depp, I thought that relationship might work, because they both seemed to share that artistic quality and endearing weirdness about them. I wasn't shocked to find out she was manipulating the breakup, but was disappointed she made it so far and threw it all away. I feel badly for Johnny Depp and anyone else she hurt along the way, because that wasn't the Amber we all knew. I hope she finds inner peace and can find that Chalera in her mind right before she launched, where she was liked by everyone except the principal. Don't know if this counts, as he's just a football head coach, but I was friends with Kyle Shanahan, who is the coach of the San Francisco 49ers. I remember his family moved in down the road from us, and he and I became buddies when we were 13 or so. Going to their house was awesome, as his dad was a coach for the Denver Broncos and 49ers, and they had so much amazing sports memorabilia around the house. On the walls were jerseys from Barry Sanders, Jerry Rice, Steve Young, John Elway, etc. It was like a dream for a 13-year-old sports fan. Kyle would tell me how he would go to training camp and play catch with these 49ers and had to do the menial jobs like cleaning and bringing water to them during practice. Kyle was a normal, nice kid, a bit competitive, but it makes sense considering his success now. His parents were super kind and welcoming. It was a warm household. They had a lot of crystal clear Pepsi, which apparently you could only get in Colorado and not California, and seeing the clear can blew my mind. One funny little story was when I was going to stay the night, and I had to call my mom to let her know. I went to the phone and was about to dial when I saw the name John on speed dial. I knew that the Shanahans were friends with John Elway and his family, so I pressed speed dial. A deep voice answered, which I swear was John Elway, and I laughed and hung up. So to this day I tell people that I had a phone call with John Elway once. Anyway, that's the one I got. Nice trip down memory lane thinking about it. So distantly related to Andy Warhol, Warholer, from the old country. I never met him, but family grew up with him. My great aunts, uncles, and grandmother would tell me about him. My great grandfather got his dad a job at the mill or mine, and side work doing construction. Apparently his parent or parents lived in one of great grandfather's rentals for a bit when they came over. My great aunt Judy was the same age and they attended school all the way until high school at Shenley in Pittsburgh. They were also very active in church together. He was always sick as a kid, they said. He was known as shy and weird. He was smart, but would spend so much time drawing in class and he would get in trouble for it. My family says he was awkward and eccentric, but when he became famous he was more talkative as only started breaking out of his shell in college. My great uncle Steve joined him at Carnegie Tech, now CMU, for college. My great uncle flunked out his first semester from going to wild parties with him, as he said, and he knew the most beautiful women on campus. But no worries, Steve went back to graduate the next year and ended up working for NASA. For the most part my family loved and adored him. There were a few times he was almost neurotic towards others when they would visit him in Nick, but for the most part he always treated them like family. He even showed up to a few family reunions until his death. Also the gallbladder problems that killed him still runs in our family. Almost all of my mother's side relations to him ended up with the problem, though it tended to be more female than males with the issue. So apparently the only thing that changed was him being able to express himself more and being more talkative. Sweet. I can bust out my Jason Priestley story. Went to high school in North Vancouver in the late 80s. Jason Priestley attended the same school, Argyle High School, and was a year ahead of me. At the time, he was somewhat known for being an actor on the Airwolf TV show. Super nice guy, and he was a big fan of our senior basketball team, which I was on. He showed up for a lot of the games, and was a very vocal supporter. Anyways, our school had a bit of a rivalry with another North Shore school, the Windsor Dukes. They had one of those big foam head mascot things. The Windsor Duke. Big bearded mascot in medieval clothes with a foam sword. We were playing a tight, back and forth game in our gym and the Duke was doing his usual capering around thing. Mr. Priestley apparently took offense at this. We were in a timeout, and I remember, because I was sitting on the bench opposite the mascot, and had a really good view. Jason Priestley snuck down out of the bleachers, and sprinted along the sidelines, dropping his shoulder, and nailing the Duke in one of the most textbook full extension tackles I have ever seen. He ends up astride the prone mascot and starts raining down 1-2 punches on the big foam head. This goes on for a few seconds, until he punches out one of the wire mesh eyes that the mascot suit wearer would see through, and he gets a good look at the wearer, an absolutely terrified young girl. He abruptly stopped his assault with a look of horror on his face, picked her up, dusted off the suit, and ran back up to the bleachers. Kicker is, the mascot suit was being worn by the girlfriend of one of the players on our team. Priestley later doubled down on this by bringing a mannequin dressed in a Windsor Dukes basketball uniform and smashing it on the sidelines in Windsor's gym. He was ejected from the gym for that one. Nice guy otherwise. Hard partier in HS. Somewhat unfortunately, he signed my annual drink and drive. Kill your kids. Jason Priestley. I met Ed Robertson, lead singer of Bare Naked Ladies. My cousin and I were around 13 years old and walking around Fair Oaks Mall in Northern Va with my grandmother. She and I had just gone to Cinnabon and were eating our food while walking when he walked out of Banana Republic. My cousin put her hand on my shoulder to stop me from walking and told me who it was. At the time, I didn't know the band or their music very well, to be honest. She, on the other hand, was a huge fan. So with a wad of cinnamon roll in my mouth and about 3/4 cups of icing on my hand from said cinnamon roll, I walked up to him and asked if he was a singer for BNL. He laughed and said he was, and then shook our hands, even though they were sticky, haha. He led us into Banana Republic and asked the woman for 2 empty bags so he could sign them for us. And he did. Real stand-up guy. Offered us tickets for the show they were doing at George Mason University that evening, but we were leaving for Chincoteague Beach with family, so we politely declined. Long story short, her friend went to that concert and they were famous for doing an ad-lib sort of song at each of their shows. That night, he did an on-the-spot song about the girl with a sticky bun, and to this day, I wish cell phones/cell cameras were a thing back then. I'll be 38 in December. Incredibly nice guy. I became a fan immediately after that day, spent about 20 to 30 minutes talking to him. Incredibly humble and welcoming man. The mall was extremely empty that day because it was around 11 AM and storming pretty heavily outside. He said we were the only ones who knew who he was. This will probably get washed away in a sea of comments, but I'll still tell it. Back in the 80s/early 90s, apparently Christopher Lloyd's half-brother attended our church growing up, and from what I heard of him, I was very little back then. He was very much a person who loved participating in church events. He unfortunately passed away in the early 90s and his funeral was arranged at our church. My mother was a church director, so she attended the funeral with my sister at the time. Christopher did attend the funeral, but as my mother recounts it, he sat in the back towards the entrance to not distract the funeral/eulogy, as he was still extremely famous at that time, coming off of the recent Back to the Future movies, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, The Addams Family, etc., and had people coming up to him. He wanted to honor his brother and not distract the funeral. So I was told. My mom said he was very grief-stricken, eyes red with tears during the funeral. Afterwards, my sister met him at the wake and said he was the tallest man she had ever seen in her life, but she was only about 7 years old, so I guess he would be to her. As she said to me, Mom asked me to come over and introduce me, saying, "This is Mr. Lloyd." And he said to her, "Hello young lady, how do you do?" And she said, "Hello," like a little kid does, and ran off to play. That's all I can tell of this recounting. I don't really remember his brother too much. I was too little to even know him, and didn't attend the funeral. I went to an international school, so a lot of my friends are children of celebrities, some now celebrities themselves, or super rich, investment bankers and the likes. The vast majority are nice people, humble, and just regular human beings. On the streets they'll sometimes try to hide their status to just enjoy their life normally, but around their school friends or community they are just normal people. They don't really change who they are before or after they become celebrities. There are some interesting patterns though. Celebrity kids are often the ones who are more bratty or entitled than the people who became famous in the first place, but this is also pretty rare. Celebrity kids will often date other celebrity kids, but I think this is just cause they relate to each other more and not a status/entitlement thing. Celebrities who are famous for the same type of thing often have very similar personalities. I know 2 self-made Instagram influencers who are in different niches, but they both have really bubbly outgoing personalities. I know 2 kids from different families of actors who are also now becoming actors. The older one is huge now. They are both cool, calm, and collected, very chill guys, also very athletic people. Most kids follow in their parents' footsteps, unless they really don't want to. Children of actors become actors, a child of a TV personality is now a musician, children of politicians become politicians, children of athletes become athletes, etc. I saw Ryan Gosling at a grocery store in Los Angeles a couple years ago. I told him how cool it was to meet him in person, but I didn't want to be a douche and bother him and ask him for photos or anything. He said, "Oh, like you're doing now?" I was taken aback, and all I could say was "ha," but he kept cutting me off and going "ha, ha, ha," and closing his hand shut in front of my face. I walked away and continued with my shopping, and I heard him chuckle as I walked off. When I came to pay for my stuff up front, I saw him trying to walk out the doors with like 15 Milky Ways in his hands without paying. The girl at the counter was very nice about it and professional, and was like, "Sir, you need to pay for those first." At first he kept pretending to be tired and not hear her, but eventually turned back around and brought them to the counter. When she took one of the bars and started scanning it multiple times, he stopped her and told her to scan them each individually to prevent any electrical interference, and then turned around and winked at me. I don't even think that's a word. After she scanned each bar and put them in a bag and started to say the price, he kept interrupting her by yawning really loudly. My wife was friends with Stephanie Meyer before the fandom hit its big boom. During the first book and right after the second, Stephanie was really close to a lot of readers and fans. My wife was close friends with Stephanie's cousin, and when the second book came out they went to the Forks book signing. My wife ended up driving Stephanie and her cousin all over Forks to see the signs and meet up with other fans. Stephanie got her number and they stayed in touch. She said Stephanie was really nice and humble, warm and fun. Very relatable as a wife and mom. My wife saw her as a friend as opposed to a celebrity she knew. My wife became a beta reader for the third book and is cited in the after credits. She helped Stephanie with a few signings she had in different cities and had dinner with Stephanie and her publicist a few times. They stayed in touch until the movies. At that point, Stephanie pretty much broke contact with all the OG fans she had relationships with. My wife understands. We've talked about all the pressures and changes that led up to her becoming much more private. It didn't help that many of the early fans frankly took advantage of their relationships with her. Stephanie's really had her trust violated. She's been through more than her fans realize. Combine that with the challenges of being launched into celebrity status while still being a mom and wife, along with a troll culture that never left her alone, and my wife understands her choice to ghost a lot of the old community. My wife still has a hard time talking about it, but has nothing bad to say about Stephanie. More than anything, she feels like she lost a friend. She hopes Stephanie never saw her as a sycophant. My wife still has beta reader copies that she won't let others read and won't tell people about, even when she ends up in a Twilight conversation. She's still a fan and loves Stephanie's other books. Even our kids have started reading her. As a husband, it was hard to watch, but we both recognize the factors that led up to it. Still fans, still nothing bad to say about her. If my wife got a call from Stephanie one day, I think they'd pick right up where they left off and talk about how their kids are doing. Reading all these jolted a memory loose that I hadn't thought about in years. Around 2005 I hung out with Jim Carrey's daughter Jane from his first marriage and the younger brother from Not Another Teen Movie a few times. Met at a mutual friend's wedding and she hit it off with my so's mom. Jane ended up coming to visit my so and her mom once or twice. She was really down to earth and funny. Played the guitar really well. She sat at our table at the wedding, but the bride's mother made us all pretend we didn't know who she was. At some point in the night someone asked the group our favorite movies, and when it got to her turn said Dumb and Dumber, and we all busted out laughing, and then she started talking about how it was to grow up with him as a dad during that time. She grew up watching the same movies we watched, but it was her dad. Weird. Anyway, we all hung out the entire weekend. It was a lot of fun. On one of her visits to my so's house I had walked outside to grab something from my car and accidentally interrupted her on speakerphone with her dad. I heard his voice and immediately took me back to watching The Mask, Ace Ventura and Liar Liar on repeat my entire childhood. I was so excited, but just turned around and awkwardly walked back in the house. It was awesome. Year or so later broke up with the girlfriend and have no idea if she still remains in contact with Jane. I wish them both well. Thanks for knocking that memory loose, Reddit. Even though I wouldn't consider them celebrities, I used to go to school with both of the D'Amelio sisters, the two girls on TikTok who look like they were genetically engendered, and the older one was even in my grade. The older one, Dixie, has always been exactly how you would think someone popular on TikTok to be. She has always been really beachy to say the least, and while in high school before this TikTok stuff blew up she was an aspiring model and, just like she is now with her sister, she would always step on whoever she could to better her career. Basically she has always been extremely two-faced. She even cheated on one of my good friends multiple times, and he was completely in the dark. Charlie on the other hand, the really famous one, was a complete shock to everyone at my school. Even though she has always been a huge dance, and I mean a real dance, not whatever she is doing on TikTok now, she was always kinda shy and quiet up until last year, when she really stepped into her own. She was actually a really nice and sweet person who you could actually have a normal conversation with, but that has basically all changed now. She has pretty much become just like her sister now, and she has burned all her bridges that she used to have as well as lost all of her friends. Although I wouldn't completely blame her, as people at my school started to really use her once she started to get big, and personality wise she had become a completely different person. My mother used to work in Memorial Medical Center in Savannah as head of the, now long gone, in-house collections department. Mom made good relationships with her employees, so when hospital administration started downsizing people out of her department, she remained in touch with some of the lost employees, offering support and recommendations for them to find new work. One of her former staff was going through a rather rough divorce at the time, and Mom, having had her own really bad split with my dad a few years earlier, took a special liking to her and put extra effort into bringing her spirits up and offered her a lot of support and some advice. The woman managed to recover some and turned to selling bag lunches to get by, better food than plain PB&J type stuff. She'd bring a load of lunches in for her old co-workers and for Mom. Everyone really enjoyed the food she'd bring in for them, and several people, including my mother, suggested she try making a new career out of her cooking expertise. She said it sounded like a good idea, she'd give it a shot. So Paula Deen started a catering service, and you'll know the rest. I'm not saying my mom made Paula Deen, but I do remember Mom talking about how she felt so bad for Paula and wanted to help her get back on her own feet after losing both her job and her married life. I met her myself a couple times when visiting Mom at work, but we just said hi and not much else. They lost touch with each other after Mom also lost her job when they finally closed her department down, and was a little sad that Ms. Dean had become famous and distant while Mom was unemployed or skipping through some low quality jobs. But she never said she wanted Paula to come save her, at least. Mom was never like that. I don't know what Paula remembers now, but I hope she's grateful for the love Mom gave her. I was friends with Ryan Dunn in grade school, 3rd grade, until he moved away. We lived in the same neighborhood. While I never physically had contact with him in the later years, watching him in the CKY and Jackass stuff he seemed exactly the same. Even my mom, who saw him on TV once when we were watching, said he hasn't changed a bit lol. He cracked jokes in class and we were doing the usual kid stuff, jumping bikes off a piece of wood on a brick, aerosol can flamethrowers, etc. But where Ryan differed was the level of commitment. He would climb out of an upstairs window onto the porch roof and climb down the pine tree next to it. At 8 years old, that was insane to us. If they made a movie about his life, that would be a perfect bit of foreshadowing. One of my favorite childhood memories regardless was when a bunch of us went to Chuck E. Cheese and the movies, Short Circuit, for Ryan's birthday. There was a sleepover at his house after, and I remember all of us trading off wearing a gorilla suit, watching a movie with some stuff kids shouldn't see, all the right moves, and playing with his legit MUSCLE collection. It's one of those awesome kid memories that doesn't have a second of bad memory to it. As much bad press as Bam and crew got sometimes, watching Ryan interact with those guys always made me feel like we were kids again, just hanging out doing stupid shit. R.I.P. Ryan. Short answer, I've squirted all over a famous basketball player. Long answer, I went to college with Steph Curry between 2007 to 2009. The guy was chill. I saw him walking across campus all the time and he always had a smile on his face. In 2007 a good friend of mine had to all but carry him back to his dorm room after a night of heavy drinking. I think that happened in early October of 2007. My interaction with him came in the springtime of 2008, and it was brief. A few Raz organized a water gun game where you had to find a target on campus and shoot them with a water gun. Everyone who entered was randomly assigned a target, and the last one standing was the winner. My first target was Steph, and I fired a shot in front of the cafeteria and soaked him square between the shoulder blades just before dinner time. I would occasionally say hello after the water gun game, and he would say hello back. Typical pleasantries. I noticed his mood changing at one point when I went to say hello after this gigantic student-led dance ensemble program that happens each semester. That was in April. He seemed pensive and worried. The only reason I remember that happening is because my mom actually came down to watch my performance and, after confirming his identity with me, asked me if I thought he looked sad. About a week later he announced that he was leaving the college without his degree and joining the NBA. The campus lit up in gossip. My college was ranked #9 or #10 in the nation at that point in terms of undergraduate academics. Poor phrasing. I meant liberal arts colleges, which typically don't have a graduate program, and some students wondered if it was a smart move to abandon a degree in favor of a risky pro-gamer move. Clearly, He made the right choice. I can't tell you if his personality changed because I didn't know him beyond a few casual greetings and a game, but he looks a lot happier now than he did when I last saw him in person. I had an on and off fling that went on for about 6 years with a skater named Dylan Reeder. It was never too serious, since we didn't live in the same city despite the fact that we were both in love with each other. It didn't matter how much time had passed without speaking to each other, or who we dated in between. Whenever we saw each other again we always picked up right where we left off. Massive smiles. Lots of laughing. Lots of inside jokes. Just enjoyed being around each other. We shared a deep connection. We'd talk about the relationships we'd have in between comfortably. There wasn't any jealousy between us, because we both felt like we truly understood each other. It's difficult to explain and sounds weird, I know. We just allowed each other to know each other on such an intimate level that understood each other's actions. We understood what the other saw in the people we'd date in between. Because we understood each other's minds and hearts, we were happy when the other was happy, and we were sad when the other was sad. I'll probably never have a relationship with another human like that again, but I'm really grateful I got to experience such a pure expression of love and understanding. It didn't matter how big he got, he always stayed exactly the same. Quiet, pensive, a gentleman, an amazing listener, very sweet, very affectionate to me. He had a soft touch. Attentive. He'd pick up on everything. You didn't have to use a lot of words with him. You also could never hide from him, though he'd never give you a reason to. He was very non-judgmental. He had a very knowing glance. To many, he'd come off as serious, but he didn't really take life too seriously. An old soul. People often described him as dark and melancholic, and he could be, but he was also light in spirit. He was rarely bothered. It would taken a lot, even though he was also a sensitive and emotional person. He possessed this quiet confidence. I remember at nights, when he would get the silliest. He often expressed his love by pointing out why he loved you. It could have been as simple as him noticing a small detail in the way you sleepily put your socks on in the morning. If he said he loved you, you believed it. He was also intelligent. He knew a little about a whole lot. He's not like anyone I've ever known. Dark. Light, sensitive, vulnerable, courageous/confident, because he lived his life without armor, walls down, allowed himself to feel everything. Perceptive, understanding, intelligent, strong. I could talk about him forever, but I'll end with that he was a very loyal friend. I've never really talked about it besides with both his and I's parents, and a couple of his friends, but thinking about it brought a huge smile to my face, and I'm in a great mood today, so I thought I'd share how truly lovely he was. I'll always miss him. I'm very thankful to him. I created this account just to answer this question. I went to school with Harry Styles in Holmes Chapel, Cheshire. We both went to Holmes Chapel Comprehensive School. He wasn't the most popular guy actually. Some people used to cheat on him behind his back, especially the boys, though I don't know if anyone was ever mean to his face, because Harry was always a very nice and charming fella. All the hatred he received was unjustified and came from people who I think felt very insecure around him. Because he'd always be very talkative in class, him and his group of friends who would sit on the back would get lots of attention. And he was part of a band. He was the lead singer. They'd perform during school events sometimes, and you know girls love musicians. You can actually find some of their performances in YouTube. His sister was very bright. Everyone in our class knew that, because teachers would always bring it up. And Harry wasn't dim. He was actually very smart too, I think. He would participate in class, ask questions and give answers that would make me think. He was very funny and witty. He made everyone laugh and was always very talkative during class, so teachers would always compare him to his sister, who was always more reserved. He'd get in trouble for talking too much. His mum was hot. Harry wasn't that fit, but he was always very good at sports. He was always doing something, I don't know how. I was with him in our football team and just that combined with studying and my teenager problems was enough for me. But Harry would always be doing something. He was involved in all kinds of different things. And he was always good at them. He had lots of energy. He worked in a bakery since he was 14. And before that he used to be the paper boy. He was the youngest in our class. When we graduated he was 16 and I was 18. Also he was dating the hottest chick in HS, and I don't know if he knew, but he already had his little group of fans in our school before he was famous. Most girls liked him. In conclusion, he had it very good. And I think that the people who would hate on him didn't really have a reason. I think they just didn't like him because we all kind of knew he would get far in life. He had that special thing that some people have, a bloody wonderful last name, and he was always a kind guy. It rubbed some insecure and jealous people the wrong way. But while he wasn't the most loved guy in high school, he was always very well known. Always kind to everyone. We used to be friends, but we weren't the closest. We were in the same football team, in the same classroom, and we would hang out sometimes after church, or after a football game, but that was it. When we'd hang out most of the time we used to talk about soccer, girls, music, and God. He would share songs he liked with me sometimes, and ask me for my opinion. He also always said to me with pride that he loved God. Once when we were talking about tattoos he told me that one day he was going to tattoo a cross on his hand to never forget that he was not alone, but that God was always with him. And he actually did it. He was always very friendly and fun to be around. Sometimes I didn't know what to answer him, because he always spoke with great confidence and without shame. I wasn't shy, but I was still very young. And I did not know very well how to respond to things, like I love God, and one day I will tattoo a cross on my hand, but I have nothing bad to say about that man. When he started to become famous it was kind of surreal for me, to start seeing his face everywhere, so I don't know how his close friends must have felt. I have to admit that I hated him a bit for a while too, because Harry was 19 and a billionaire, and he was traveling around the world enjoying his youth to the fullest, while I was 21 years old struggling to eat at university, away from my family, unsure about me future, and going through the phase of life is more difficult than I thought, and I'm sad about it, that most young people go through. I was just beginning to mature. And when I look at him now, I think Harry Styles was always wise beyond his years. Obviously he knew things that I didn't know when we were both still kids, and that's why he'd break his ass doing all the things he'd do. That's why he'd tell me loved God. I don't know what things would happen at his house, but he obviously had to mature from a young age. I think he deserves all the success he has. The place where we lived was a village. There was not much to do, and almost everyone knew each other. I remember one morning I was playing on my computer, which was next to my window, and I saw Harry ride his bike down the street at 5 in the morning towards the street that led to the bakery where he used to work, where I used to buy bread. I was 17. I stayed up all night playing games on my computer, and that 15-year-old boy got up at 5 in the morning to be able to collect a salary at the end of the month. The truth is that, since he left the village and joined his One Direction group, I've not spoken to him in person again. The last time I spoke to him was at our graduation party, and it was only to ask him if he had seen my date. But my grandmother and my mum still live in the village, and they told me that sometimes Harry comes back to visit some friends he still has around there, like the people he used to work with in that bakery that has now become kind of a tourist attraction in the village. And in 2016 they saw him in church praying. They waited outside the establishment for him, and when he came out they spoke to him. My mum told me that Harry was very nice to both of them. He talked to them for hours. He bought them a cake. He drove them home, and then sent a flower arrangement to each one of them 1 week later to thank them for their time. So in conclusion, Harry Styles before being famous was an admirable young man. Harry Styles, after his fame, seems to me to be an even more admirable man. I think the only thing that's changed is that he became more incredible. I've listened to his albums. I went to the show he gave in London in 2018 with my fiancé, and I was amazed. He was born to be on that stage. He is very talented. I think he will go down in history. I know that treat people with kindness is his motto, and he has always radiated kindness. I genuinely feel that he will become an icon of music and history. I almost can't believe I went to the same school with him, and a part of me wishes I had been closer with him. But I feel lucky to have been able to see the beginnings of someone so successful. I will have a child in 2 months and I will try to encourage the spirit of hard work in him. I will teach him to always be kind to people, and I will take him to church and pray that he also loves God and finds whatever it is that Harry found. I will share his music with him. And with all that, I hope my son ends up being someone amazing as well. Much better than me. Humbly, a happy man. Donald Log, TLDR, super chill and nice, down to earth dude. So, this isn't before they were necessarily famous, but I just didn't realize it at the time. I went to college in Malibu, and I was moving into an apartment in Calabasas. While I was moving in, I noticed a neighbor was moving into the downstairs unit as well. He approached me and asked me if I could help move a mattress in for him as he had just had shoulder surgery. So I did, and he asked me if I knew of anyone needing a mattress. He was replacing one that he had, and I actually was lol. It was either an air mattress, a futon that I had, or the ground, and he was like, you can have this one, points to this legit queen size, and then says lot of PPL been faked and killed on that. Jokingly lol. I just had to move it upstairs, which was no issue to me being a rugby player / front rower. So I go to work literally later that evening, and on my break I decide to watch this movie called Maximum Pain. Because I was a fan of the games lol, and I'm like, wow, this guy looks exactly like my neighbor. I see the credits roll by and sure enough it's him. Had no idea. Went back that evening, knocked on his door, and was like, dude, that's legit. He was always chill. Was in the apt, so he could be close to his kids, who went to school nearby, and he was also filming a TV series. We let him borrow a can opener once, and in return he got us pizza lol. Got his contact info when I moved out, and we still shoot the shit every now and then. I remember growing up in Goleta next to the UCSB campus. Of course there were loads of sororities and dorms where we lived. We lived in an apartment complex where my parents were the managers. Sadly enough, we lived in the same proximity to where those sorority murders happened back in 2014. Anyways, I was 7 or so, it's spring break. Me and my dad are in the parking lot, he's washing his car, I'm somewhere in my room trying to entertain myself as a kid, and then I hear my dad start talking to some of the college students who knew him back in the day when he was a janitor. They ask him for the hose because they are going to start a water balloon fight with the rival houses, which they do. Of course younger me sees this, and I'm mad, or that I'm seeing adults play like children. Eventually someone from the first group tells me to join them by filling a bucket with water balloons and such. My dad ends up helping me out, everyone is soaked, and eventually we all end up saying goodbyes. But before we do either, my dad ends up asking if I could take a picture with all of them, which they all happily agree to, especially the one who asked if I would help. He's front and center making funny faces which had us all laughing, and that would be that, right? Well, turns out later down the line my dad and I are watching movies, and one person stands out to him. He pauses and ends up going to the back where he kept all the family photo albums, and funny enough that same guy who randomly told me to help with water balloons who made everybody laugh with funny faces turned out to be Jonah Hill before he starred in Superbad. I grew up with some of the guys from Coheed and Cambria. Lost touch with them about 15 years ago. Josh is pretty much the same guy, comes from a family of musicians, and just loves making music and being with friends. Mike went down a dark path I didn't expect. He was always a really nice guy that everyone loved. Super optimistic and funny. Nate, the original drummer, was the other real lovable guy you wanted at every party, but by the end, was a drunken disaster someone had to clean up. He was the guy I assumed was always going to live in someone else's couch. After they kicked him out of Coheed, he went back to college and has been working on Wall Street. Still, nice guy, huge music lover, and still plays drums in a band. Claude, what he went by then, is unrecognizable to me anymore. He was a shy, quiet guy, a really smart guy and solid musician, but always had a shaved head, spoke very quietly, hung his head, and rarely made eye contact. Then all of a sudden he has a PR team and is on magazine covers. Also doesn't remember many of his friends from before he got signed. My friends and I made a documentary on them before their first headlining tour back in '02 or so, and Claude is picking his nose in all the interview footage. He just didn't know how to be around other people. Point bonus. Ryan Cohen from Oddities was also in our circle. He's doing what I remember him always doing, great art. But friends of mine run into him often, ex-roommates from 10 years ago, and he tells them to their face he doesn't know them. Bullshit. The closest I've known anybody was Adam Grandishiel from the War on Drugs. I was in the Philly scene. My guitarist played for another band with decent success. We all lived in Fishtown. I met Adam a few times. He was always very quiet. Never got to really know him, but being a deeply depressed person myself, I could tell that he hated the hanger-ons. My guitarist played a few shows with the War on Drugs, and I know that Adam used his Fender amp. My friend didn't get his amp back for months, and I'm pretty sure that it's his Fender Twin Reverb that Adam used on his breakout album. I'll never forget Adam's house. It was mentioned in an article by a music journalist too, because it was so reflective of his state of mind. The walls were dingy from his chain smoking. He also had a ton of cats because of his girlfriend. The entire second floor smelled like cat piss, and there was kitty litter all over one of the second story rooms. There was a huge downward slant to it too. He seemed pretty genuine, and he was nice to everybody. Living in Fishtown and playing music, I met many low profile bands. That guitarist slash roommate of mine played bass for a band signed to Drag City. For a hot moment, nearly any decent band out of Fishtown was getting signed to a 90 label. That guitarist even opened for Wilco, and he played with Dinosaur Jr. numerous times by J Mass's request. Hell, I remember hanging out at a bar and talking all night to the bassist from CKY. We used to have house shows with acts that later had middling success. Piss Jeans used to keep their gear at my house because my roommate let them. I didn't care for those guys. Fishtown used to have that kind of vibe. Sorta on topic. I know Ron Jeremy pretty well. A few years ago, I did business with an older, Hollywoodish couple, and they ended up scamming me out of money big time. At the time, I was on the fence getting attorneys involved, as I still considered them friends, and everyone in my small town was under their illusion of glitz and glamour. Even the cops didn't want to get involved. But I remembered they bragged for hoots and hollers that they knew Ron Jeremy, and so I called a buddy in LA who worked in MTV music videos at the time. Asked him if he had Ron's management company contact info. He gave me a number. I called it and left a message. About 5 minutes later, Ron Jeremy himself calls me back and starts giving me the lowdown on the Hollywood couple. For the next 4 hours, he details to me how they operated like Bonnie and Clyde, scamming people across the country with their glamorous ambience, writing forged checks everywhere, and taking people's money like they took mine. It was crazy, and even crazier when I researched everything he said. It was all true. Suddenly people, businesses, stores all over the country started calling me about them, asking for their whereabouts so they could chase them for money they too got scammed out of. And now I don't feel so stupid because some of these people and companies were big time. Even crazier, Ron Jeremy was calling me almost every other day for the next year to either get the latest on the couple or just to shoot the shit about life. It was hilarious. We didn't first meet up till years later at comedy event he was doing and hit it off pretty well. He's everything you imagined. Short, ugly, pudgy, hairy, funny, and also a total bornster. Not kidding. So many random women were constantly coming up to him, taking their tops off so they could get pics of him kissing their chest. And he banged 3 different girls who literally walked up to him, grabbed him by the hand, and took him either to the bathroom or backstage. It was surreal and crazy. Of course, now he's in big trouble lately in the news, but that's how I saw women were with him every time we hung out together. Over 5 years ago, I was dating a beautiful blonde named Christine, conventionally pretty in all ways, and if I was 20-ish, she was only 18 or 19, and we were at a Pittsburgh shopping mall one afternoon. I enter a Foot Locker with her. I see shoes I want off the wall and proceed to sit and wait while the clerk goes to obtain them. At this point, I realize there is a lot going on within the store. Over several minutes seemingly, the store became flooded with people just buzzing about. At this point, I realized that about 10 guys were essentially in there together, a group, but they were anomalously conspicuously wealthy people too. kept crowding in the store and right outside of it, pointing and buzzing and photographing relentlessly. The guy next to me, a part of the larger clique, then starts to talk with me and her. And shortly thereafter, he yells out his friend's name to show him issue, Guxy. Ah yes, and from a group off to the side until that point, my boy Guxy Main arrives. It was apparent he was the leader. I had never seen so many diamonds in one place. It was at the Gen Northeast Sasquoi. He was very quiet, reserved, and nearly encapsulated by one or two other guys at all times. The guy next to me, just someone in the entourage, was cool. He offered us tickets to the show that night he was in town for, and he got Guxy to take a picture with Christine. As he was otherwise presumably looking for his size in a rack of shirts, at no point did he even acknowledge her, not even glance at her during the picture. It was her standing to a guy with his head the other way. Lol. Shortly thereafter, their group left, and he had to walk right next to me, still with one of his friends. I put my hand out and said thanks for the picture or what's up, or whatever, and he put his hand out too, but not to shake my hand so much as to grab my wrist, lowering my hand, deeming it wholly unshakable. Lol. Great musician but a really great guy. I apologize for bad English in advance. I used to have this good friend that I would spend most of my free time with. He was nice, polite, and generous person. We've been friends for more than 8 years. He started slowly making music, singing, playing different instruments. A few years ago, he became more busy, which is totally understandable, since he was up to lots of stuff and didn't have much free time to spend with friends and me. He became pretty successful musician about a year ago as a singer. He gets couple of million views on his clips usually. By no means was I gonna use our friendship to gain some sort of advantage or to get money. The guy was a good friend to me. He was very likable, so I wanted to keep him as my friend. I once asked him to go out for a coffee, chat a little, since we haven't seen each other in a few months. I've noticed he became very aggressive. He was more mean, and most of the time he assumed I wanted to be friends with him for money. Many have done this, used their friends for money, but I had no such plans, and would never do that. He kept whining about money, the fame, fans. I was happy for him first, but he just kept going and going. I've noticed how big of an ego he had grown, and holy shit. I'm sorry, but he became a biggest dick ever. Fast forward, we met exactly 2 more times after that, and after the second time I stood up, told him to never call me again, and left. Money made that man blind, desperate for more. That's not the same nice, polite person I once knew. So please, if you ever become successful somewhere, gain fame, don't become a total dipshit. Please. I was translator in a movie in 1979. Eudokia was known in avant-garde circles after Warhol/Morrissey and Fassbinder, but before Van Trier and Tarantino where he became a real celebrity. He had a flamboyant outward persona, and a very kind and clever inner self which he spared for his friends, and we did become friends. Non-sexually. I'm never sure as these things are not so clear, but it seems to me he was bi. But acted very gayish. I suppose he wanted to make a point of this in a Soviet-ruled country. He said hi to cute Russian soldiers on the street, but they rarely went on the street, but sometimes it just did happen. He kept in touch. Of course I was also working as a writer and actor and I wrote 2 other movies in which he acted. He got my monthly salary in a day. Haha. And it is typical that he was invited in our ex-Soviet country to get a lifetime award. Because his big movie made here was a very important movie really in many ways here, and the reporter asked him why did you spend almost a decade here in this drab backward small country, and he said, I had friend he like Zai and oil based, and some others who are already dead. I do not think he changed much. He seemed to me authentic, full of humor and benevolence, and he stayed like that in the last 40 years. I learned a lot from him, as I do small acting jobs besides my vice rabbinical job. The main thing I learned from him, that you should not do anything at all. If the scene is well built and real, you just better stay real. If you are an evil person in your role it will be evident from the story, and not by making weird eye flashes. I was good friends with a now celebrity, that I'm going to name Socks. Socks was really cool. He had a huge crush on me for a long time, but he wasn't my type. This didn't damage our friendship though. We used to meet up at the arcade with some friends. We all hung out in a group for years. We slowly split up as we got jobs, but would meet at an anime convention every year. I remained good friends with Socks. One year, at the convention, Socks showed up and said he found a good gig. Socks is very lovable and someone thought he'd be a good announcer/host in the esports world. We were all very excited for him and we all went out to celebrate. He kept saying how we got him to where he is and that he'll never forget us. Had a great time and said our goodbyes until next year. Over the next year, Socks goes from lovable to insufferable douchebag. He started making good money and hit celebrity status in the gaming world. He started being mean to everyone and then would send them expensive gifts as an apology. He'd say things like, "I know you can't afford it, but as a famous person, I'll buy it for you." He awkwardly started requesting sexual favors from our friend group for money, saying he'll buy us cars and houses. Then one of our friends passed away, and he never made it to the gathering. He said that he was too important to go. He was busy signing autographs at a convention. He slowly stopped talking to us altogether. We ran into each other at the anime convention a couple years ago, and he went on a tangent saying, "Look, I'm rich. I can get you anything. Why don't you just go out with me?" He started demanding that I at least acknowledge his wealth and just give in to it. I don't do well under pressure. I gave in and gave him a kiss on the cheek. I regretted it and told him I wasn't interested in a guy like him. He suggested that we do a little more than a kiss on the cheek and I walked away. We haven't really spoken since then. None of our original friend group talks to him anymore. He tried similar things to almost everyone in the group. Money and celebrity status made him think he owned us and that we'd just let him do whatever. His esports career is currently in the shitter. Teams don't want to work with him and the larger esports companies aren't hiring him anymore. There was never anything public as to why they won't hire him. I suspect something nefarious happened behind the scenes. TLDR. Close lovable friend turned into insufferable douchebag within a year of entering the esports scene. Wow, I can contribute. Any too hot to handle fans here? I went to high school with Hallie. She's not as dumb as she puts on, although she copied off me in high school, but I didn't know what I was doing either. She was not this blonde hot girl. She was emo as hell with her black hair that swooped in front of her face. She was also incredibly kind and thoughtful. I think she still is kind and herself at her core, at least I hope so, but when she joined Zeta, they really changed her into what she is now. I mean, good for her, if she's truly happy I guess, but it's such a far cry from who I knew her as. Like I'm glad she's not still super goth and shy, but she's so drastically different. It makes me really sad, because we had classes together for 3 years. She sat with me occasionally and chatted enough to be considered friends. She just was not the type to make vlogs about getting hip injections. She also has had so much work done on her face at 22 years old that I can hardly recognize her. Genuinely. And again, I saw the girl 5 days a week for 3 years. We also went to the same university for a while. I went to a frat party my freshman year and I got drugged. She stopped me from making out with some rando. So she's definitely a good person. When we talked and her friend left, she relaxed into our conversation more and seemed like herself. It's just odd to see the persona she puts on, in my opinion, versus who she was with me at that party. And in high school, I'm happy for her and all her success. I just think she's lost the Hallie that I knew, and it makes me sad to see her put on airs as someone so vapid when she isn't. Both a friend of mine and myself became famous separately. The short answer is yes, it changed him, and I know that it changed me. The long answer is I find being famous is a test of character. Everyone goes back home at the end of the day to whatever your home life is, and that becomes a lot more mundane than you could possibly imagine. The challenge is to not let yourself be affected by. We both studied in it in the same small town college, where we quickly became good friends. It's been over 30 years now. We are nearing our 50s, and we still tight. He became way more famous than I did though. I won't say his name, but after working in the field for about 10 years he decided to become an actor, did a lot of small-time theater plays, and grinded hard for his artist credit, UA in Canada. He eventually made it to various televised commercials and played roles in movies. Silly story. A while back we met up for lunch and decided to go to Hooters for kicks. The waitress said she recognized him from somewhere. With impeccable timing, a Budweiser commercial was playing on the TV with his face in it right behind her head. Familiar face I guess, he said while we got seated. Our smirks probably made us look like assholes, but the truth is, he is still internally blushing to this day whenever he gets recognized. He changed, but only because his life experience made him go through a lot. He left a comfy paying job with easy money and decided to go into acting, where he struggled considerably for years. It's only because he loved, obsessed, over acting that he kept at it. Years later he made it. He remembered where he came from. He remembered the pain he went through, and I guess he sees and appreciates that in people who come to him for coaching or advice. That is one of the advantages of being famous. Even on a bad day, people want to work with you, even if you sucked. Being famous is stupid like that. You won't pardon a newcomer, but you will give someone who is famous all the slack in the world. It's very unfair. This one of the many tests of character I was talking about. Your ego can easily take over and make you act in ways that you would have never done before. This is where I can relate. I've kept at my job forever, but I did get considerable notoriety in through my photography, for a while at least. For me, it was weird to be the kid that always got picked last at school, only to be appreciated by the same type of people that I identified as being the popular folks. It did not matter if I was always awkward in social situations. People liked having their pictures taken, especially if it was by me, and this was well before the selfie era, so I would get invited to things I never got invited to. During the day, I would be with my then girlfriend and her daughter. At night, I'd hang out in green rooms, VIP sections, sitting with models, DJs, and musicians. I'd be behind stages for major concerts, while getting ready for the 3-song picture session. Drinks were always on the house. People wanted me with them all the time. I barely knew anything for their personal lives, save for a select few that actually had me meet their families. One such friend invited me over for New Brunswick spaghetti you just mix in a can of Parlock. We ate at his 2-person table in his kitchen. I remember feeling like it was the most down-to-earth friendly invitation I had while I was over there, and he is one of the even fewer I still talk to from that era. EJ that I knew back then, also a bit famous, gave me the best lesson about how to survive this without becoming a complete douche. People out there want to be your friend because of what you do, not because of who you are. Case in point, when I moved back home from all of this, out of the 12 or so people I asked to help, only 2 showed up. It was a very positive experience for me overall, but I quickly understood why people could easily become assholes. If people want to be with you, you have some pull over them. If you have some pull over them, you will easily find yourself skirting the edges of what you considered to be normal behavior before. People will do anything for attention. People say yes to things they could easily regret later in life. I'm glad I did not do anything super shady, but to be honest, I'm lucky I was dumb enough not to think about all the shit I could have gotten away with it. If I had pushed my luck even further, he never became an asshole. I don't think I became one, but I'm not entirely sure. We still hang out whenever we can. He's one of the few I can talk to about this past life that would actually understand how I feel. I guess in some way, so does he. No one really internationally famous, but I know/knew the guy who played William in the original Norwegian Scam. He and his friends, who play William's friends in the show, went to both the same elementary and middle school as me, year above, and have always been douches, both pre and post fame. We, amongst other things, worked at our local church together for years, and after Scam became popular, so many girls wanted to do their confirmation in our church that the church administration had to ban him from working anymore, and he was a little disappointed because he really liked all the attention. Most of his friends were also volunteering in church, but quit at the same time because they didn't want to be there without him. The year before Scam took off, him and one of his friends had the nickname Shower Kings at our Bible summer camp, because when they were like 20 they had a lot of sex with 14-year-old girls in the showers, despite us even having a meeting before camp specifically to talk about how unethical it is to do things like that. Also went to RHS, that a lot of famous Norwegian musicians have gone to, including Alexander Rybak. Apparently he was really shy and weird, and all my teachers talked about him because he was really nice and friendly towards them. He's still nice, shy and friendly from the times I've met him. And the Norwegian crown prince's stepson is a jerk and struggles a crazy amount about the fact that everyone else in his family are royals, but he's not. He did his confirmation at the church I mentioned earlier, and back then he still had official duties. So during summer camp, he got picked up halfway through the week by armed guards in a limo and made a big deal about how he had official royal duties to attend to and how important he was. He isn't. And at least in middle school he used to bring people up onto the roof of the palace just to show off that he could. He did that to the girl sitting next to me for quite a while in middle school, and then apparently took her virginity and immediately dumped her. Now he's given up his royal duties in an attempt to get away from paparazzi, but he goes, or at least went, to college in the US and is dating models, and also doesn't correct American paparazzis when they refer to him as a Norwegian prince when he isn't and never has been. That caused a lot of outrage in Norway because he shouldn't give up his official duties in Norway to get out of the spotlight and then move to the US and use his previous status in Norway to get spotlight in USA. Knew all the guys in the band Jump Little Children when they were still busking on the streets of Charleston, South Carolina. My then girlfriend and I would have them over after gigs and cook for them. After they got signed, their album Magazine unjustly tanked and the label dropped them. The band broke up, but then reunited a few years back and found that their fans were still enthusiastic about supporting them. A big part of that stems from the fact that all 5 guys in the band are genuinely nice and really care about their fans. The success of their second go around is really cool to see. Knew Kari Ian Hurst and Michael Trent before they fell in love and joined forces to become Shovels and Rope. They now throw a superb music festival here in Charleston called High Water Fest that always has a great lineup handpicked by those two. Hurst in particular is a sweetheart who used to waitress at Justine's Kitchen in Charleston by day while playing anywhere she could at night. She and Michael both slugged it out in the trenches for more than a decade before finding fame, and they're both still down to earth, chill people who still live in town. Used to go see the guys in Hootie and the Blowfish Play small bars in the early 90s. Even then you could tell they were onto something. We never thought they'd become as huge as they did, but it was no surprise when that band got signed to Atlantic. The guitarist, Mark Bryan, in particular is a lovely human being. He's always out seeing local bands play and recording local musicians in his studio. Very supportive of the scene. I was good friends with David Lee Roth in high school. John Moo, Pasadena, 72. Dave is exactly the same guy he was back then. I'm reading the new Noel Monk, former Van Halen manager, book Run In With the Devil, and he talks about that same singular focus in Dave's personality. We'd sit in the parking lot smoking fatties, and Dave would tell us in no uncertain terms, "I'm going to be a rock star." We'd reply, "Dude, pass the joint." Dave had a flamboyant style about him even back then. His idol back in '69 was Mick Jagger. He dressed just like him, pooch his lips out, and hit on the hot black girls we were all bussed into from wealthy white neighborhoods in landmark integration ruling, with success. He had major game, even back then. We were in drama together as well, a great group of kids, 2 of whom went on to get an Oscar nomination for their screenplays of The Elephant Man and Frances. We'd compete against the best schools, Beverly Hills High, for one, in the assorted LA drama festivals, and did quite well, even if we were faded. I remember Mammoth, Seminole VH, playing at Moo and various Pasadena parties before Dave had joined the band. They were amazingly good even back then. By the time Dave had joined, I'd gone off to college in Orange County, so I missed the VH with Dave era of legendary Pasadena parties, but I was super stoked to see my old stoner bud make his dream come true in '78. I went to college with Mickey Madden of Maroon 5. The other guys too, technically, but I only ever saw them at concerts. The first time I saw them play, that band was called Flowers for Kara, and they played upstairs at the Westwood Brewing Company. The only other person in the audience was Adam's mom. Mickey was a cool dude. He was kind of shy and didn't talk to that many people in the class. I honestly don't even remember what happened that made us start talking, but it was pretty clear that I was one of the only people he hung out with outside of the band. He was a good guy and always had a really laid back attitude about the world, great perspective on life, and how to stay positive. I had a few friends in bands, and I made it a point to always support them and go to their shows whenever they played. The guys in Maroon 5 were really good. It was clear that they were better than most of the other bands my friends were in. That said, they seemed totally oblivious to it. Even when they started playing bigger venues and had hundreds of people show up to see them, they really had no idea. Mickey would call me, and I'd go see them at the Snake Pit, or on the Rocks, or at the Whiskey, and we'd always stay out late drinking afterwards. He had this funny habit of introducing me to the other bandmates every single time we hung out. Adam always played along and pretended we'd never met, which was hilarious. At one point they had to kick the guitarist out of the band because he just didn't want to dedicate the same amount of time that everyone else did to practice. Everyone else at that point had moved into their rehearsal space, quit their jobs, and decided that they were either going to make it as a band or die trying. They didn't have a penny to their name. They got a new guitarist, and their first show back was at the Whiskey. If they had been good before, they were amazing now. Their music was so much tighter. Adam was doing his job and making love to the microphone. The new guitarist was a bit of a showman and kept doing things like using his beer bottle as a slide or playing with his teeth. It was fun to watch. But most importantly, they sounded awesome. I remember Mickey asking me how it sounded at the end of the show and whether or not I could tell that they'd been practicing 14 hours a day. I could. I really could. He seemed genuinely concerned about my opinion. He also introduced me to his girlfriend that night. She later became his wife. We all went out drinking, I think to the Rainbow Room, but I really don't remember. We got smashed. It's funny, I remember having a great time hanging out with Mickey, but I don't really remember what we talked about. Probably just jokes and general chat about whatever. I don't know. Normal conversations. He's a really chill normal guy who just happens to be amazing at bass and incredibly disciplined when it comes to rehearsal. About a week later, my trusty T616 caught fire in my pants pocket, and I chucked it out the window of my car and then ran it over a few times to put out the flames. It was a 6-year-old cell phone, so it wasn't any big loss, except I lost Mickey's number. So 2 weeks after that, when I heard them on the radio, I couldn't call him to congratulate him, and he got busy with record contracts and tours. So it's understandable that he never called me either. I had some near misses, where I showed up to a club my friend was jing at, and she told me he had just left, or when they played a concert for Sony at E3 one year, and by the time I fought my way to the backstage area, their bus had just pulled out. My wife even told me once she saw him at the grocery store, but didn't feel comfortable saying anything. Ultimately, I never saw or spoke to him again, and that was all 18 or 19 years ago. I guess I can't say how different he is now, since I don't know what he's like at all these days, but he was a great guy in college and after, and the whole band worked their ass off to get the level of success that they've had. It's all well deserved, and I wish them the best. Just wish I could tell Mickey in person how proud I'm of him. I miss my friend. My father and mother were close friends with Chris Christopherson's parents and Chris Christie to his family and friends babysat me a few times in Saudi Arabia where we were living at the time. I think this was when he was at Oxford on his Rhodes Scholarship. He later fell out of the good graces of his family when he decided to try to make it in Nashville. He divorced his first wife, whom his mother adored. We continued to see a lot of his family, who moved to Southern California. It was only when I was 19 that I saw Chris in concert. It was at the Phoenix Star Theater and he played 2 sets with an intermission. At the time he was with Rita Coolidge, a woman his mother didn't like because she wasn't Chris's first wife. During the intermission, I handed a note to one of the Rhodes that said, basically don't know if you remember me, but it would be nice to catch up after the show. When I went back to my seat, 2 girls behind me asked what was on the note and I gave them the background. They responded with yeah, right. Chris comes back on stage and walks to the mic and kind of mumbles if my first and last name is here, I'd like to see him after the show. I pulled my wallet out and let the girls see my name. They asked if I would take them to meet Chris, and I said no, of course. After the show I go down, and it's very natural, like it hadn't been 15 years since I saw him. He offered me a beer, introduced me to the band and Ritter. We talked about his career and the movie he just made, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, with, among others, Bob Dylan. While we talked he would take an ice cold Coke from the fridge, pour out half and fill the can with Jack Daniels. He was starting on his second can when Ritter came over and took it from him and poured it out, then got a second can and put just a bit of JD in it, reminding he had another show in about 30 minutes. I didn't want to wear out my welcome, so we finished talking and I left. When I got home my mom grilled me for 30 minutes on the whole thing, especially the part about Ritter's concern about Chris's drinking. First thing in the morning she called Chris's mom and told her the whole thing. A week later Ritter got a package from Chris's mom, a handcrafted 18-karat gold and turquoise bracelet that she had bought in Egypt while traveling with my parents. Chris is a fascinating man, very intelligent, wonderful songwriter. Already met them in their fame, but this is my chance to share. I met Norman Reedus a few years ago when I was in high school. He was filming his motorcycle show. I had just left work, restaurant, and my friend who was working a later shift called me and said, "Bro, Norman Reedus is here," called bullshit, and asked for proof. Then he sent me a picture with him, and Norman with "Is this proof enough?" I didn't believe him, because we live in small town. So I told my mom to turn around, and we got a picture with him. He's a pretty chill dude. I met Oscar Isaac when I went to a climate justice march in New York. I was taking a time lapse on my camera while everybody was socializing, and then they said, "We have a special guest who wanted to speak. We have a special Star Wars pilot here." I said, "No way," and looked over, and it was him. He was walking around Brooklyn at the same time as the march and decided to give an impromptu speech about how he was glad to see young people trying to make a change. I got a video of him playing drums and talking to people. Also got a picture with him. He seemed pretty cool too because he took the time to talk to everybody that wanted to chat with him. His hair was a lot more gray than I expected. Met two of the ghost hunters and technically got to work with them, Jason Hawes and Steve Gonsalves. Got a picture with them also. These rich VIP members at a casino nearby got the chance to do some ghost hunting at my job site with them, which we had to be there for, so we got to use some of their equipment and go with them on their hunts. They seemed just like normal people once I got over the starstruck phase. C9 Singleton in JFK Airport. I went up to him and said, "Yo, are you T-Dog?" He immediately looked around and then nodded his head yes. I was like, "Oh right, sorry. Can I picture with you?" He agreed, asked where I was going, then told me to have a safe flight. Very small exchange, but he was nice. Or thread I can contribute to. Two notables from my time at a now prominent Memphis private school. I sat next to Jennifer Goodwin in art class. We just assumed she was gonna do Broadway with her talent. Watching an episode of NBCZ back in the day, I'm thinking, what the hell has this girl done before? She looks so familiar. One IMDb trip later, boom. Number 2. Same school. There was a girl Mary a year behind me who had a younger brother in the lower school. One day this kid's racing through the halls with a guitar, and I'm going, that kid thinks he can play. One day I'm reading a copy of Spin going, where have I heard this last name sound so familiar? Boom. Andrew Van Weingarten of MGMT. Point also of note was a kid whose parents worked at the school. One was guidance counselor, other was biology teacher. They actually lived on campus. This kid, then a senior, built a cyclotron, atom smasher, out of like 2x4s and microwave parts. Garage built, though technically they didn't have a garage. Wins the World Science Fair that year. Interviewed by local shock jocks on a morning radio show who called him Cyclotron Boy. He took it in stride. Lol. Needless to say, I only spent 2 years there before going back to public school. Still very bitter about things that went down, but at least I can say I had a brush with some greatness. Oh, and the school is now 3 times the size. This is a bit of a drawn out story, but I feel like telling it. In high school, a girl I was dating whose best friend was dating Brendan Urie about 2 years before Panic at the Disco got signed. He showed up with his drummer, but they hadn't even named their band yet. But dude was hilarious. Imagine the kid with that who just has the most awkward interactions with random people for the entertainment of his friends. I ended up hanging with them after our girlfriends went home, because we had a shit ton in common, both from Mormon families who we completely let down. I played bass, but was more into the hardcore scene than the pop rock one, but I didn't really keep in touch outside of a few random AOL convos, and he lived on the complete opposite side of town. About 2 years go by and a different girl I was friends with had said Fall Out Boy signed her friend's band off of one demo and they hadn't even played a show. She showed me their MySpace or whatever and I wasn't expecting to see his band there. I reached out, said congrats, and reminded him I slapped bass. I actually had toured in a metal band Molotov Solution who was on a small indie label, but eventually signed with Metal Blade and blew up pretty big in that scene. So I tried to use that as a way into his band, but they already had a bassist. God damn it, another year or so goes by, Panic is all over MTV blowing up, and my best friend's band is a big local thing in Vegas. They were called The Cab, and somehow got their demo to the drummer I had met years prior, and from him to Pete Wentz, and then boom, they were signed to Fueled by Ramen / Atlantic. That summer Panic was writing their second album, and rented a cabin up in Mount Charleston 45 minutes outside of Vegas, and a member of The Cab had a family cabin in the same area, so in the day they'd write music, and at night 50 kids would show up with hecka illegal substances of all varieties. Debauchery ensued. Brendan was always cool as hell. He was a very generous individual back then with certain unsaid substances. If you want a clarification, go compare their first 2 albums. She just the singles. The second album single is called 9 in the Afternoon. Listen to the chorus, and if you are savvy I think you'll catch on. We actually streamed Pink Floyd synced up to The Wizard of Oz from his MacBook to a projector. Anyway, he's a genuine dude. I haven't seen him since. I'm glad has been as successful as he is. With all that said, The Killers are the best band to make it out of this gorgeous trash hole of a town. Never met Brandon Flowers, though I know he's super down to earth. And apparently the Imagine Dragons guys are super cool too. I guess Vegas isn't so bad after all. I'm into music, but only as a hobby. I went to school for it, and did it professionally for a while. I met this chick at an anime convention, in a music related panel, and discovered that we both loved a specific Japanese band that was not very well known in North America. It's an older band. Turned out she knew it, because she was from Japan, and living in North America temporarily to practice English. We were friends for years. She moved back to Japan, but I would visit there, or she would visit here. We hung out at conventions together, went to concerts together, including by that band we both love, and did a few performances together, but it was just for fun for me. While she wanted to become a professional singer, eventually a Japanese record label scout saw one of her performances and signed her. And she immediately became a total stuck-up beach. Then she did an anime opening, and became too cool to talk to me. Our paths crossed several times after that, but she started just ignoring me. Her career lasted about 7 years. Then she married one of the guys from the band we both love and quit singing. Not that I blame her, the guy was hot, back then at least, but he's 30 years older than her. So she's no longer a celebrity, but she still thinks she is, because she's married to this guy. So she went from nice and friendly to stuck up diva. And I have to wonder how much of her niceness was just her getting people to help her get discovered so she could get close to that guy. Lol. Burton Cummings, probably more Canada famous, but These Eyes in Superbird and Taking Care of Business are 2 of his most famous songs. He often went to the local watering hole and my father loved him, so he would always talk about how genuine he was. One day, once I was 18 and could legally do so, I walk into said watering hole and see him. He sees me. We both give each other that I know you look, but I'm not the type to go disrupt anyone when they have a beer and food in front of them. Me and some buddies start playing pool, and one of the servers comes and hands me a Budweiser. I hate Budweiser, and tells me he bought it for me. I go over to thank him quickly and leave him to his food, and he says, "You don't need to thank me. Just tell your dad I say hi." At this point I have to explain that my father had passed the year before, and I saw him go from smiling to almost crying. He got up and gave me a big hug and said, "I know he had his issues with alcohol, but I hope you know you were his pride and joy." This broke me, and I started to bawl whilst he hugged me, so he asked the manager to block off the back room and just hug me while I cried like a little girl for about 10 minutes. The most genuine human experience I think I've ever had, and it was from a guy I had never met in my life. Then we went back to his mansion. He played me a bunch of my dad's fave songs by him on his amazing piano, while we did a bunch of coke and faked some very high class escorts. He's moved since, but every once in a while when I'm in that bar I will order a bud just to remember. Probably really late to this thread, but here goes. My high school had maybe 1,200 kids in it, grades 9 to 12, USA. I guess it depends what you consider a celebrity these days. Sat behind Grease Ed and HS Band, Grant. He's cool. He played alto sax, which makes sense if you know his music. I could see that band teacher saw him as like a troublemaker type of kid, but he was one of his favorites in an endearing way. I feel like he always got in trouble. I wasn't good friends with him or anything. Wish him all the best with his success, and he has made some real bangers. Evan Kasperzak got third on SYTYCD season 5 with his signature Broadway style. He was in a lot of the school musicals, and was always great. Incredible dancer and choreographer. He also played ultimate frisbee in one of the clubs with me. I remember him backflipping off of a wall in the hallway once, and another time in ultimate frisbee, where he went to catch the frisbee, and did a flip to catch it, just because. I wasn't great friends with Mike Potner. I just remember him as the captain of the track team. I have a mixtape CD of his from maybe 2007 or 2008. I didn't think it was that hot, but it wasn't my kind of music, and I mean, he was in / just out of high school. He took off with Cooler Than Me in college and I really dug that track. He found his style and his voice and I wish him all the best. Meryl Davis, another person I didn't know super well. I remember her, and some other people I knew, being on the school district's ice skating team, and she was, it goes without saying, really good. She's now a 2x world champion and Olympic gold medalist in ice dancing. When I was a freshman, and she was a junior, I think she was going out of class, and I was going in for some English literature class. I mean, it's been a minute. Joshua David Evans was fairly popular on YouTube. 30,000 subscribers when I met him. He has over 1.2 million subscribers now. He was dating Colleen Ballinger, the person who plays Miranda Sings. At the time, I filmed his proposal to her on his 30th birthday. Josh is very kind and very funny. He's one of the most genuine people you'd ever meet, and cares a lot about his friends and the people most dear to him. He's making less content for YouTube now, and seems to be happy. We just talked with some other members of our a cappella group not too long ago. There was this class clown in my school. We didn't get along. I thought him immature and childish. He thought of me as an immature nerd. We never paid much attention to each other, and never had any kind words to say to each other, until a mutual friend told us that we were crazy. He couldn't fathom why we weren't friends. Jimmy Fallon and I found a friendship thanks to Joe IG. We would end up hanging out or playing computer games at each other's houses. After we graduated, he was off to St. Rose in Albany, New York for a computer science degree. I was going to the local community college. I got a call from him one evening. He was all excited. "Scott, you would never believe what I did. I did this stand-up comedy at a bar here in town." I thought to myself, great, Jim has got a hobby. A few years went by. I moved to Princeton, New Jersey and was listening to the radio one fall morning when I heard that one of the new cast members of Saturday Night Live was the one and only Jimmy Fallon. I nearly hit the ceiling of my apartment. More time went by, and I was able to get tickets to see one of his Tonight shows taped. The guy still gave me a hug, although I'm not convinced that he recognized me. A lot of time had passed since we graduated from SHS. I'm very happy and proud of him. He's the same awesome guy that I graduated with in high school. Joe I proved to both of us that sometimes that our initial view of each other could be wrong. I haven't talked to Jim in years, but his TV personality is the same that I remember growing up. Always a comedian. This isn't up there with knowing Brad Pitt or Charlize Theron, but as many of the scientists are faceless, it's been interesting seeing my mentor, Dr. Erin Bromwich, reach celebrity scientist status. I've known him since 2008, when I first got my master's with him at UMass Dartmouth, a little known campus of the UMass system, and started in 2016. I went back for my PhD in his lab. Outside of comparative immunologists and fish immunologists, not many people would have heard about him. As a side project, he had been putting Facebook statuses about coronavirus, which his wife suggested turning into a blog. I can remember him telling us it was crazy, that he 20,000 views, well, that quickly blew up to millions. Before I knew it, he was on CNN constantly, writing for CNN, publishing in the New York Times, making it into Wired and Vox, the list goes on. I'm not sure how private he's being about all of this, but he is flying from Massachusetts to Los Angeles this week. As for changes from being a respected scientist in a small university to this, where he's even making it into Reddit, it hasn't gotten to his head. He says it's a flash in the pan and it's his 5 minutes of fame, until the pandemic is over. The most difficult parts for me, and he's apologized about this, is that he's pulled in so many directions that he can't devote as much time as he'd like as our advisor. Even so, I'm immensely proud of him. Being able to communicate science to the public has been something he's stressed for years. It's great seeing someone I admire get this sort of recognition in a time where it feels like science and intellectualism are denigrated. My aunt is an LA-based comedic/character actress you've seen in a few sitcoms and a few movies mainly in the late 90s and early 2000s. She was able to have a nice apartment in Santa Monica, but you were really paying for the location and that was with her and my uncle working. The elevator up to it was the scariest elevator I've ever been on in my life. The floor bounced when you walked in, and I felt like I was going to fall through. Even though she had had some success, she was my first realization that actors need to work to earn a living. She was still hitting auditions and on the actor grind despite her relatively minor fame. As a person I always got along with her very well and found her extremely funny. Apparently she didn't treat my uncle super well and was kind of all career all the time, which led to their divorce. I still have fond memories of her and enjoy seeing her in things. I remember she had this little candy dispenser/coin bank thing on her counter, and it was next to a little junk/coin dish. When I was visiting and was very young, I started feeding all the coins into the candy dispenser and she came up to me in her very thick, and in this case purposefully exaggerated though still real, Jewish accent and went, "My name Wadea doing that's my laundry money." My dad tells the story of her coming to visit my uncles and my family back in the Midwest and driving past one of those stores on the side of the highway with hundreds of lawn statues for sale. My aunt, who has never lived outside of LA, goes, "What are all those?" And my dad says it's a store that sells lawn ornaments. And my aunt says, "Lawn ornaments? What the hell is a lawn ornament?" This was a bit of a joke between them for a long time after. My uncle threw her a great surprise 50th birthday party and had a lot of her comedian friends perform. A lot of actors with roots in the LA improv scene and shows like Mad TV. I'm 99% Alex Bornstein sang a song, but I was too young to realize just how crazy of an event I was at. A less interesting one that I don't care about naming is Ben Higgins from The Bachelor. I only flew kites with him one time a long time ago when I was little, but my dad's family and his go way back, and they pretty much only took joint family vacations out west for much of the 60s. His grandmother was a nice but very blunt lady, and she and his grandfather both thought it was just awful he was on such a sinful show. Edit. Another post reminded me of a few more. Sprint car racing is pretty big in my area and my dad has always been a huge gearhead. He was a crew chief for a friend of his that raced in the area. He said that their team raced against Tony Stewart when he was getting his start, and he was a great driver and all around good sportsman. Dad has been a fan of his since. Dad also got pretty tight with the members of Rio Speedwagon because they regularly played a club in the area and then partied at said club. Dad really liked their music and would hang out with them and drink and talk music. Mom was at a party once at my other uncle's college. She was bored and went and found a back staircase at this frat house to sit and smoke on. She found this guy there with a guitar She sat down and struck up a conversation and she and this guy chatted for several hours. The next day she tells my uncle about it and he reveals to her that Eric Clapton was at that party and that was definitely who she was talking to. I think I can share an interesting perspective on this. I have always seen myself as a relatively average and normal person. My line of work over the last year has started growing my profile very quickly, and in the space of 12 months see myself in international press, TV, magazines etc. I low-key expected that I would probably get famous for what I do, but and always thought I would remain and act the same, but it's impossible. What I didn't account for is how people around me will change. You will never truly understand the value of your anonymity and privacy until you lose it. It starts with family posting photos together for clout. It moves to conversations being screenshotted and put online. Being wary of photos in public, because often a pic can be taken and shared out of context. I found myself slowly losing faith in people, having to develop a thick skin and really not trusting anyone anymore. If someone were to have observed me for 3 years, they would think I became snobby, but I go to more exclusive venues to not get harassed, I live somewhere different to not be targeted, or people turn up at my house. They do sometimes. What's interesting is there is nothing bad at all being shared and publicized, but it's disconcerting when you go for a coffee with friends and tabloids publish photos asking who the new mystery person you were seen with is. Or that time where you spoke about a political viewpoint and then it's being screenshotted and shared as if it's a truth. Over the last year, I have changed. You were changed too. Were you in the same city?